Have you ever wondered why some people just seem to thrive when they're learning to write in a new language, while others, with pretty much the same background, really struggle? It's a puzzle, right? One that's had educators scratching their heads for decades. Well, in this explainer, we're going to unpack a really powerful new way of thinking about this whole thing. One that gives learners a brand new toolkit for success. And our story starts, like a lot of good ones do, with a case study. We're going to zoom in on two students whose experiences, I think, really shine a light on a much bigger picture about learning. So meet Benny and Ellen. Now get this. They're both from Indonesia. They're both in the exact same English writing class at a U.S. university, but their results couldn't be more different. Benny really struggled, while Ellen just knocked it out of the park. And that is the big question, isn't it? If they're from the same place, in the same classroom, what on earth could explain such a huge gap in their success? To figure this out, let's first take a look at the old way of thinking about this problem. For a really long time, the go-to explanation for situations like Benny's was a theory called interference. The basic idea here is pretty simple. Your native language, what we call your L1, just gets in the way. Its rules, its cultural habits, they're seen as a kind of roadblock, something that actively fights against the new style of writing you're trying to learn in your second language, your L2. So, here's how that theory got applied to Benny. The thinking was, well, his Indonesian background values a deep respect for authority, and that just clashed with the Western academic style, which expects students to poke holes in things and question sources. From this point of view, his own culture, his L1, was literally the problem. But what if that's not the whole story? I mean, what if the first language isn't the villain here at all? And asking that question leaves us to a really crucial missing piece of the puzzle. Turns out, a student's own motivation, their reason for learning in the first place, plays an absolutely massive role. And this distinction is so important. On one side, you have instrumental motivation. That's when you're learning a language just as a tool, a means to an end, like getting a degree. But integrative motivation is totally different. It comes from a real desire to connect with the new culture, the new community. And when you look at it through this lens, Benny's situation suddenly makes a lot more sense. His motivation was purely instrumental. He saw English as just this annoying hurdle he had to clear for his degree. And because of that, he kind of resisted working with others and just wasn't interested in digging any deeper. Ellen, though, was the complete opposite. Her motivation was integrative. She was genuinely curious, she actively went looking for new and unfamiliar ideas, and she really wanted to engage with the material. So this fundamental difference in their whole approach, well, that seems to be the real key here. Okay, so all of this brings us to a much more powerful and, frankly, more useful way of thinking about this. It's a concept called bricolage. Bricolage is basically the art of making something new out of whatever you happen to have lying around. So for a language learner, this means using everything in their mental toolkit. And this is the key part, including their first language, not as something holding them back, but as a creative resource to build something new. You can see this is a complete paradigm shift. The old interference theories saw the two languages as being at war with each other, but bricolage? It sees them in this cool, creative dance where one can actually inform and enrich the other. And hey, this pattern wasn't just about Benny and Ellen. When you look at the full study, the trend is crystal clear. Just look at the students who succeeded: Malek, Saji, Marvin, and of course Ellen. Their strategies all involve this creative mixing of their first language with their second. Benny is the only outlier here, where his L1 was seen as nothing but a conflict. For example, take Malek. He drew on the rhetorical style of balance and juxtaposition that you find in the Quran, and then brilliantly used it to structure his arguments in academic English. He didn't ditch his background, he leveraged it. And then there's Saji. She used her personal and cultural stories as the very foundation for building a strong argument in a totally new academic genre. Her identity wasn't a weakness, it was her source of strength. And this brings us right back to Ellen. How did she succeed? Well, now we know. She applied the storytelling strategies she knew from traditional Indonesian fables to her analysis of American literature. She was a bricoleur, building a bridge between her two worlds. So, what does this all mean? What's the takeaway for teachers and for students? It means we have to stop thinking about learning as replacing one thing with another and start thinking about it as expansion. So instead of trying to erase a student's first language, the real goal should be to encourage that creative interaction. It's not about replacing their old skills. It's about giving them more choices, more tools to work with. The researcher R.B. Kaplan absolutely nailed this way back in 1987. He said the job of a teacher isn't to force one right style, but to increase the size of the rhetorical inventory a student can pull from. It's about more options. So let's just put it as simply as possible. A student's first language isn't a bug, it's a feature. It is not a problem that needs to be fixed. It's another valuable, powerful tool to add to an ever-expanding toolkit. And that leaves us with a really fascinating question for our own time. In a world full of blogs and social media and video, how can all these new digital platforms create even more opportunities for students to mix, match, and invent, to become the rhetorical bricoleurs of the 21st century?